5th, finding love on X. 6th, getting hired on X.
I thought you said getting high on X.
Oh, getting hired. But that is a topic.
So tell me what you'd like to say to me, Hurls. Go.
Okay, so just to catch you up. Actually, if you like, just to catch us up, do you know what's going on, or what is your impression of what's going on and what's happened? Because I know you've only touched base with us a little bit. I can catch you up and give you a run over what's happened if you haven't by someone else already.
So my understanding is someone gave themselves a challenge to come up with something and produce it and put it on sale within a certain number of hours. And I can't remember if it was 8 hours or 12
Yeah,
or
that's
something like that. And the
yep. So
production
that
was a book, and one person bought it, which I thought was fascinating. And I think you're just talking about the contents of what that book involves. That's my understanding so far.
yeah. So I set Michael, who is now Waddy, hosting the space, is made a statement about he was analyzing or learning about a CRM, and he goes, you know what? I think we have enough now to create, manifest, and bring to market a product and have it sold within 24 hours. And I said, me being who I am, going, that's a bold statement, mate. How about you put your time where your mouth is and prove it? And he was like, okay. So we opened up a space and we said, righto, we're going to give ourselves 24 hours. What are we going to do? And he was like, well, I've been thinking about writing this book for 10 years and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, it's about time. You know, we sort of came to the decision it was about time he did something for someone else instead of doing everything for himself, everything for other people, sorry. And fraudulent slip. And anyway, so within 8 hours, he come up with a draft. Within 24 hours, we were reading and having a laugh with what he'd written and doing all these character voices without using it for voice work and things. And then he was able to get it up on Amazon. Amazon has a 72-hour period. We hit that brick road where they have to proofread it. So he found another website and he put one copy up for sale, and we were rushing to buy it and racing. And I got the first copy, and then we were saying, joking, well, it's sold out. So that's where we were with it. So it was this pretty funny experience. But then what we started to do is like we're just telling people what we did. And because we were having fun reading little excerpts from it, we thought we'd just allow other people to read excerpts from it too. And the way we've been doing that is by reading it out to them first. So essentially it gives us the chance to engage with that person in the space and read them out the titles, and then they tell us which title most appeals to them, and then we read them out the chapters, and then they tell us which chapter most appeals to them, and then we DM them that chapter. And it's for them to do with it whatever they want. And then, but we get to, record their first experience. So they can share their thought. They've been doing different things like just reading it and laughing out loud, or doing character voices with it, or actually relating it to their own personal lives and how they relate to that part of the chapter, and just and throwing in words too, like, and making the sentences their own. So it's been kind of enjoyable to watch how this little challenge has turned into somewhat of an endeavor and a little. So yeah, so here we are. We have Sheri. So I'm going to read Sheri from the 3 phases, the titles, and Sheri, if you can choose which one most appeals to you. So the first phase of the book is transforming conflict on X. The second phase is applied social engineering on X. And the third phase is the villains on X. I can read them out again if you want.
Oh, they're all interesting. So go again.
Yeah, tell us about that. Let's go again. So I'll read you the first one. Transforming conflict on X. The second one, applied social engineering on X. And the third one is the villains on X.
I like all of them, and I can, as you're reading them out, I'm like, yep, that first one is good. I remember thinking that to myself when you first said it. And then the second one, I thought, yep, that applies to the first one. And then when you said the third one, it's like, well, they all sort of link in together. So I'm interested in all three of them. Um,
Mike, you might have to send Sherry a link so she can buy the book. Oh, by the way, which we won't announce actually, we won't announce. Oh, yeah, okay, we will. We're announcing right now. I'm hoping you've done this, Yui, by the way, because you were supposed to be. He's releasing another copy, and there's already Fehmi and Eileen who want to buy the copy, and now it's yourself. So um, feel free, but you're with us now, so the power is yours to make one choice at the moment, Sherry. I'm sorry, I can't give you any more than that. I wish I could, but it is your power to choose one of those three.
so the first one was a conflict one, yeah?
Yeah, so the first one was
It's a conflict.
transforming conflict on X. So
Okay,
what we
so I
can
think I'll
do,
just go with that.
okay, all right, let's go with
Because I
that.
think the other two sort of go with that very closely. So it might be better to read the first one. And then if
Okay,
I'm thirsty, I'll ask for the other two.
okay, all right. Okay, so I'll read through the chapters. There is a number of short chapters, and here's the first one. The Apple of Discord. Second chapter, I didn't have a choice. Third chapter, why fights are creative. Fourth chapter, don't take the words too seriously. Fifth chapter, the barrier to knowledge. What chapter are we up to? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sixth chapter, attacking the funny bone. And the seventh chapter is I am because you are. And I can read them again for you if you like.
Okay. Fights are creative is good. And what was number 6?
Number 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Attacking the funny bone.
No, go back one more.
The barrier to true knowledge.
Back one more.
Don't take words too seriously.
One more.
My fights are creative.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard another one in there.
And the one before those, I didn't have a choice. And then the first one was the apple of discord. And the last one was I am because you are. I like how you're taking control of this and making me navigate it.
Okay. Fights are
Yeah.
creative. I like that
Yeah.
one.
Okay. Why
Because I
fights
think
are creative. Yep.
yeah, because I think that that's sort of like when you're reading that, I feel like that's the core of it.
Okay. Yep.
Because
So
that sort of tells me that you're going to explore dynamics in there.
okay, cool. This is good. So Yui, I'm hoping Mr. Michael Jagdeo is DMing that chapter through to you. And while he's doing that, Sherry, if you could do a bit of a slate and tell us who you are, how you found yourself here, a little bit about yourself, and yeah, you're in control of this. Do it however you want.
Oh, how far back do you want me to go, Joe? I've been
That's
on
that's
X forever.
completely up to you. It's completely up to
Okay,
you. This is
all right.
your show now.
I'm gonna bore you guys to tears. So, I
No,
think I got on Twitter first when I was very political. And there was the Kurdish situation in Anatolia, which is Turkey, now renamed as Turkey, and I was pretty upset by the what was going on with the politics there, and that's when I first came on. And then I had to delete when I started traveling because it got very tense, and there were people put in prison, all that sort of stuff. Because I'm very much for animal and human rights. I was very political. So then when I started traveling and could see that shit gets serious, I pretty much deleted all my posts. And then crypto came along. So I remember I was on Facebook one day, I clicked a link and found myself on Telegram and met all these people and ended up meeting people like Roger Ver and Jihan and getting involved into the crypto scene, found myself in Japan at Bitcoin conferences with lots of nerds. And it was quite an exciting time and quite a trip moving away from politics into the monetary system. But then as time went on, I could see there was a lot of scams happening. There was a lot of greed. It wasn't about the technology, and it wasn't about, freedom anymore. It was very much about how the bucks that you could make and how many people you could get on board into a community and get rich from it. So after a period, I became disenchanted from that. I still, believe in Bitcoin Cash to the possibility of peer-to-peer exchange, if and when they get rid of cash, because I know that there's an attack on cash. And I know in Australia very recently, Optus, went offline for a while, and people couldn't buy anything. They were in a really bad position, and they're getting rid of ATMs and all that sort of stuff. And I've been part of the movement here in Australia as well in keeping cash and writing to, people in power, in relation to having those freedoms for us. So yeah, and then I've jumped onto Twitter from Telegram, of course, into Spaces when they first began in 21. I think it was October 21, and it was very exciting. And I became very addicted to Spaces, and it was terrible. you know, we were, like in the book that you're putting together, there were a lot of fights and all that sort of stuff. So it became a social experiment for me to see how far I could go on such a platform, and really just going with the process of what happens. And I remember opening rooms, and it'd be a room where I was reading people's voices and checking to see how much data I could gather just by hearing your voice. And that went pretty well. I found that I could just talk to someone and be able to imagine where they are, socially, emotionally. It was fascinating that I could pick up data so well through voice. Um, and then I would do, funny rooms, I would do political rooms, and just getting to understand what happens, and a little bit like the content that you've got there, the social dynamics, the fighting, um, trauma bonding even. I think that was a thing that I was looking at for a bit on Spaces, the roles that people take, what those interactions do, from trauma to overcoming that trauma to people becoming more robust in these spaces over time, providing that they've got, some support. The level of, some of the narcissists without diagnosing them, in Spaces. You know, there's all sorts of people, I guess, that you come across, and also people you wouldn't normally interact with in your normal life. So how often, do you meet someone from Africa who's doing something somewhere, or India who's living somewhere else, or America, or wherever, all over the world. So I guess it's been a great opportunity just to have this experience. But then last year it got so bad, I was on Spaces sometimes falling asleep, waking up and still in a space. Got pretty tragic, and I thought, okay, I need to move away from this addiction. And I remember buying a ticket, going to Amsterdam, then going to Italy, and going to Istanbul, and spending some time in Antalya on the Mediterranean in Turkey, and just detoxing from Spaces, and then coming back, and then getting back to work. So I did find the tragedy of spending almost 2 years in Spaces and not being productive. And I noticed that I wasn't working, I wasn't learning, but the learning experience was in the space. So it was like having a group dynamics course, and really being embedded in it, and noticing what happens to me, noticing what happens to the people around me, and also noticing how that affects my life. And I think we've spoken about this before, Hells. So it's been a great social experiment. So that's why what you guys are doing and writing about it, is pretty exciting. I'd probably, want to look at it from an existential perspective in future, a phenomenology perspective in future, all that sort of stuff, and maybe link it to human existence pretty much, and explore that aspect of being in a space and the way in which we entangle and what meaning we derive from that personally. And it's great that you're sort of talking to people in relation to reading a chapter and then looking at the response that comes. And then I'm not sure what you do with that, but it is interactive in and of itself. Where that goes, I'm not sure, but I can see that it's a creative process, and that you're exploring this. So I'm excited with for you guys with what you're doing. Yeah, that's it.
No, that's okay. So we're hoping that you can tell us what you're thinking while you're reading it, or read it. We can read it to yourself and then give us your thoughts. So engage us in your first experience with it and tell us what comes to mind. And don't hold back either. Like, this is a space where you can be truly. Yeah, Bubba.
Do you guys want me to read it out as I'm reading it? I mean,
Yeah.
that's an
Well,
option.
this is. So this is an opportunity where basically the show is yours. So you tell us what you're going to do in your own way, what you're feeling. If you're just going to read it to yourself and then give us your thoughts, or read it out loud, or
Let me struggle with it openly so that you can see what happens, I guess, and I
yeah.
could always replay this to myself. So let's have a look at it. 3, why flights are creative. They don't want to talk, they want to dominate. Fights are important, really important. Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, I think that's how you say it, they all learned from the fights of Socrates. What's love? Why do societies die? These were the topics that got everyone fighting. As Socrates taught through the process of verbal sparring, the process the nerds call the dialectic, timeless teachings like the analogy of the sun, the ship of fools, these are all stories that emerged from students trying to fight Socrates. Conflict can be creative. You ask a question. Teachers give an answer. You call the teacher's answer into question, and that's where the learning begins. This question and answer process is called the dialectic, and it's how the greatest teachers of our time have chosen to spread their teachings. Every argument starts with a position, which Hegel and Fichte, I think that's how you say it, would call the thesis. The argument against the thesis is called the antithesis. Whether they're fighting over Jerusalem or the presidency or the sale, people trade their ideas and counter ideas, theses and antitheses over and over again. Language disguised thoughts. Wittgenstein, I think, is quoted. Usually when you talk to people, they don't want to talk, they want to dominate. Most of the time, they don't want to have a conversation. They want to place judgment on your soul. And you can use this to your advantage. So the next time someone picks a fight with you, ask them a question, no longer than 8 words. Emotional people love answering questions. And it's by their answers you shall know the truth. And it's by their answers ye shall truly know them. And it's by their answers that you shall discover where their pressure points are. And at the perfect time, you'll ask the final question. Now, you might not get anywhere, but the audience will feel it. And people don't remember what you did for them, but they will remember how you made them feel. When it comes to competitive relationship building, how you make people feel is the competitive advantage. You do not need to be the smartest person. The Mongols won wars by convincing the allies of the Chinese not to fight. Cortes won the war by converting the allies of the Mexicans into his allies. You can win a war without throwing a single spear if you understand how wars are really won. Transform hate into love, and you'll have the power few have ever felt. In order to transform hatred into love, you'll need to learn how to see past the words people use to disguise their thoughts, their emotions, their gut bacteria, their fungus. Words don't tell you what people mean. Far from it. Interesting. It sort of reminds me of what I was saying a little earlier. When people would talk, I could do a reading about their social situation. I could their level of distress, where they were emotionally. And I think when I read that, what comes to my mind is how important it is to be able to listen.
Yeah, I was thinking about all the times you would rip into someone's bullshit, but you was able to do it in a way where they would still hang around and you could engage with them in a way where you could be brutally honest with them and dish out some tough love. And then, yeah.
That's interesting that you say that, because that goes back to what that chapter says, because I think people ultimately knew that I loved them and I would create those
Yeah.
bonds, and they knew that, I was their ally, I wasn't against them. So I guess it's as that chapter sort of says, it's talking about creating those bonds and getting people on side, so then you can actually have a relationship, and then within that relationship understanding that you're not going to always have positive dialogue or affect, but build those relationships to be strong enough so that you can have all sorts of phenomena within that bond. So, and that's how you kind of win the war, for lack of a better term. So I think it's really interesting that you're exploring these dynamics. And if that's the chapter, I think that can be fleshed out a lot more. And that's possibly an opportunity, like you're doing now, in looking at it and getting a response from people, so that when they read it, what does come to mind. So my little pearl in there would be the capacity to listen, the capacity to have empathy, because a lot of people don't understand that empathy is data gathering. It has nothing to do with being kind. Nothing. So you'll find that, sociopaths and psychopaths will use empathy to gather data. It doesn't mean that they're going to be nice to you. They're gathering data. So I think that would also be something that you might want to throw in there. Yeah, there's so much. It's such a rich area, I think, of exploration. And then what sort of theories do you tie to it? How do you make sense of all of that in a meaningful way and flesh it out? I think that will be your challenge, but I think you're off to a really good start.
I think everything that you said there, because of your background in psychology and social psych, you really got to the heart of that chapter, which is fights are creative if you shut up and listen. And you don't have to listen to be kind, which is, I think, a freaking interesting insight. Oh my God. I was floored by that. I was like, wait a minute. Because you're saying that we kind of kind wash empathy?
Empathy has nothing to do with kindness, zero to do with kindness. It's data gathering. So if I can imagine myself into Hurl's world, I have more information about him, and then I have more power. So, and I'm not saying that I have power over him, I have more power in the relationship. So if I don't do empathy and I know very little about Hurls and I'm not interested in what's happening in his world or inside him, then my bond with him is not going to be very solid. When we're around people who can actually connect to us and really ask you, like, how does it feel to be you? And then want to know, how is it? What's your life like? I want to know what happens inside you. And to then be able to respond to that person, you have got someone who's seen you, who accepts you and understands you. And that's what that's where it is. So anything other than that, any other dialogue where you're not really connecting to the other person and you don't have enough information, I don't know. I mean, what has been your experience, Michael, when you come across people and you're forming those bonds, like you've said in that chapter, and the war is about having a good connection with the other person so that you can navigate the relationship or the world or the war together, as opposed to people that you don't have a connection with. So it's an interesting thing to sit and think about. But I guess, when you look at psychology and you look at Freud, he coined the terms, the id, the ego, and the superego. And the mind and interactions were about war. And even though people might say, Freud was crazy for thinking like that, when you look at Freud and where he came from, he came out of an era where there was a lot of war. So the way in which he conceptualized the psyche was being at war with each other, which is interesting. It's, the macro and the micro sort of come together. So I think he was quite the genius and the artist, really. So, and when you separate the concepts from the man and the personality, what he came up with was pretty brilliant. And I think people misunderstand what he contributed, his art, into the field. So I think it's interesting how we conceptualize things, and I've sort of gotten off track now. I don't know where I'm going. What was I saying, Michael? Can you bring me back?
I'm listening to everything you're saying and I'm just taking it in. You definitely should write a book. And if you can start by writing the book by just doing what you're doing right now, I think a lot of people would listen. Because you really got to the heart of that chapter in a single word, which is empathy. And then you took it one step further, which is redefining empathy in a way that I have not heard before. I've often asked my wife, Allie, if I'm a sociopath or if it's just some sort of undiagnosed autism or something. She's a teacher, so she's dealt with, people on the spectrum before. So we often go back and forth. And so when you talked about information gathering, I'm a recruiter. My whole job is to be a human polygraph. And so I think you nailed it more than you might have realized.
That statement you made as empathy as data collection was pretty amazing. I was like, wow, that's a really good way of understanding empathy without any kind of positive or negative connotations. So I just want to say thank you to that. That was a really good one. I'm gonna steal that one.
Steal it. I stole it from a man called Kohart. He's a psychoanalyst in America, and there's all this pushback from psychoanalysis today. And I always say to you guys, I'm a dinosaur. I've been around for a very long time. Okay, I'll read it out. Don't take the words too seriously. A very great mystic poet, Rumi, once said, I am a sculptor, a moulder of form. In every moment I shape an idol, but then, in front of you, I melt them down. I can rouse 100 forms and mix them with spirit, but when I look into your face, I want to throw them into the fire. Okay, so when I read that, what comes to me is, it reminds me again of phenomenology where, things are formed and unformed. Reality is continuously unfolding before us. What's in the foreground? What's in the background? What are you noticing now? What are you paying attention to? What aren't you? Like, it's just a constant. And then what does he say next? I can rouse 100 forms and mix them with spirit. Like I imagine him talking about like being that kaleidoscope where he's able to be anything in any moment, and be spirited about it, be passionate about it. But when I look into your face, I want to throw them into the fire. I wonder what that means. When I look at your face, I want to throw them into the fire. Does anything come up for anyone else in regards to that last line?
The them there, he wants to throw in the fire. What's the context again from just before?
So I'll read it again. A very great mystic poet, Rumi, once said, I am a sculptor, a moulder of form. In every moment I shape an idol, but then in front of you I melt them down. I can rouse 100 forms and mix them with spirit, but when I look into your face, I want to throw them into the fire.
I mean, the sense I get, and maybe it's like when you really meet someone, like almost in the namaste sense, that all of life's constructs, he's talking about these idols that he forms all the time to melt down, like all of that concept of like idolizing the physical and the godship that we attribute to things, just literally, he melts away.
I gotcha. Okay, so everything so he's forming and reforming depending on all the constructs in the world, and he's shaped and
But when he
reshaped.
sees when he sees their face, yeah, fuck it all, right? By
Everything
comparison,
is
they're all
nullified.
trivial, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I like that poem. It's beautiful.
Okay, I'm going to read it from the top. Don't take the words too seriously. Where we meet in the silence between the words, Ram Dass again. One of Steve Jobs' heroes said it best. Now, each evening when I'm going to come out to speak, I invariably think of the line from the Tao Te Ching that says, he who speaks does not know, and he who knows does not speak. And I see the absolutely bizarre humour of my predicament. I realise that I have to be both of those. I have to be the part in me that is not speaking that knows, and the part in me that's speaking that doesn't really know. Hopefully, they're connected. If you're open to the possibility, let the words merely quiet your minds, and let's meet on the other level where we meet in silence between the words. We come together to speak about the unspeakable because the rational, analytical mind, the intellect, only knows objects. It only knows what it can think about. What we come together to talk about are really matters of the heart that are known subjectively, not objectively. They are always hidden from the eyes of the thinking mind. Yet I'm in the world of business, so we just have to take the words very lightly. A very great mystic poet once said, I am the sculptor, a moulder of form. In every moment I shape an idol, but then in front of you I melt them down. I can rouse 100 forms and mix them with spirit, but when I look into your face, I want to throw them into the fire. The you in this case being the beloved, or that higher part of ourselves. Our minds are creating realities. We keep creating models of ourselves. We keep creating expectations about the world. We create these forms of clay and we try to breathe life into them. But the minute you look directly into the eyes of forms, they all seem to dissolve before your eyes, and you're left speechless or heartful. That's it.
Sorry, Sheri, I hate to do this to you, but you're so good at this. There's a poem that I realized I should include into the book. It's very short. Would you indulge us one more time, or at least myself?
I'll just have a look at it. Did anyone want to respond to anything in that before I'll go and look?
I do have something to say because people don't know my hand is up or down. I do want to chat with Femi because we did do a call out to her and just wanted to lock in on the spaces, but I do not want to interrupt what Sherry's got going on here. I think it's great.
I'm sorry. Were you talking to me? Because there was a lot of sound there, so I couldn't really.
It's okay.
Did you get that, Michael?
No, I didn't quite catch what you said. That's what I said. Can you repeat that?
Hurls wants me to say it now. Is that right, Hurls?
Oh, okay, cool.
No, it's okay. Sheri, would you mind indulging us, and then we can switch gears,
Okay, so you want me to read this?
if you don't mind?
I don't mind. Okay, I'm just opening it. Okay. I Am the Great Sun is the title. From Normandy Crucifix of 1632, which was a long time ago. Okay, and this is how it goes. I am the great sun, but you do not see me. I am your husband, but you turn away. I am the captive, but you do not free me. I am the captain, but you will not obey. I am the truth, but you will not believe me. I am the city where you will not stay. I am your wife, your child, but you will leave me. I am the God to whom you will not pray. I am your counsel, but you will not hear me. I am your lover, whom you will betray. I am the victor, but you do not cheer me. I am the holy dove, whom you will slay. I am your life, but you will not name me. Seal up your soul with tears and never blame me. That's it. So, Michael, tell me why you wanted to share that one.
We used to identify with the way that we sequenced words, but I think we have enough information and technology to know that if there is a divinity to us, it's not in how we use our mouth words. It's in something more than that.
I feel like I need to read it a few times.
I've been reading it over and over for 10 years. Femi, what Hurls was mentioning was we enjoyed your reading so much that we wanted to do the same thing, that we're essentially continuing something that we never imagined would happen, because this is all really fresh. What day is it today? It's the 15th. I think we
Yeah.
did it, and I think we did this on Sunday. So I'm there's a phrase by Reich in the book: if the teachings are true, they will spread on their own. And so, however this needs to spread, I'm fine with it. I don't need to make any money from this book, especially if there is a bunch of people who see where this can go, and knowing that the way that can be spoken is not the true way. That said, the same message in a different voice is not the same message. So is it possible for us to reach people that maybe I can't reach because of the way I say things, but that you can? I think that's true because of cultural personalization. And so I think that's where the strength of the community is, because we can, translate these things across cultures and disagree where necessary, because that is the dialectic. Without the antithesis, you're disagreeing with each other, and that's how we fall off cliffs.
Oh, it was something about the LLM. Oh, okay. So I think what happens when you use an LLM, it's really difficult because it's not as dynamic as when someone who has a deep understanding of the world. It's just not the same. Like it'll segment things. So it'll go into, for example, phenomenology, and it'll just stay there and go into depth on that. And then if you ask it to sort of like be look at a particular thing from several different perspectives, it does, but it'll give it to you individually. So it's a different sort of conversation with an LLM than I think what we have in here. And I think the difference is because people come in, jump in, or put up a hand, or throw up a love heart, or do something, and it sort of reshapes everything that you might be talking about. Or someone might be not saying something, and my mind goes blank. So it's very interesting what happens in a space like this, and when you're having a conversation, as opposed to using an LLM for it, and what comes up, what doesn't come up, and just noticing the nuances, I guess. Like Dan jumping in and taking us somewhere else. And it's like I almost need someone to read that passage again, because I've forgotten what it was about or how I felt about it. So I guess I always look at things from a sort of like a phenomenological perspective of what's merging, what's emerging, what's happening, what's not happening, what's being said, what's not being said, about a topic. And that's why I was interested in how they respond to that. And it was interesting that Mentis had a negative response to it, which was good, because it's like, what is narcissism? What does it actually mean? And why are we pathologizing our need for other people and to be filled by other people? So why is it bad that I'm asking for something? And is it okay if I can ask for something and you not have to give it? Is it okay that I can come across as manipulating and you say no? Do you know what I mean? So I think a lot of this stuff around narcissism has become pathologized to such a degree. People feel guilty for wanting attention or wanting to be the center of their universe, and or feeling like they're being selfish. It's like, no, sometimes I am selfish, and other times I'm very giving, and I can suspend my reality for long enough to listen to you. So I think, yeah, I'm a little bit with Mentis, but I might get you to read the passage again, or someone to read the passage again, so I can go back into what sort of data comes up for me, if that's okay, if someone wants to. But we'll go to the rest of the hands. So it's these guys that are being forgotten now. You won't find this information. This was for is it the Burgoyce? The rich people would get all this information, the very rich, and you would go and get, your inner worlds and your reality analysed by analysis. You'd lie on the couch and You would have someone explore your world. It was a luxury, and it is still a luxury. Who can afford, unless you have a psychotic meltdown, to see a psychologist, or you've got some sort of drug abuse? So people now have got a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor only during crisis. So, when we go back into the past, it was something that was enjoyed by people who had money, who could pay for that attention. And here we are in spaces, which is very much like group therapy. And I think people being drawn to this space is not about narcissism per se. So I'm just going to go into my response. It's because we're feeling more and more empty as time goes on. And we've been told that if you buy a flashy car, or if you buy this house and you're the envy of your neighbors, you might feel full on the inside with consumerism. And I think as time's gone on, people are feeling empty. They do want that connection. They do want to have more meaningful conversations. They do want to be seen. They do want to be heard. They do want that interaction where they're growing. And it's all about growing your emotional tolerance. It's about being able to be better regulated in the world, because people who are better regulated tend to do better, and it was affordable to the rich. So here we are in this space, learning from each other, entangling. And as we do that, we're becoming more and more robust in that we have all sorts of emotions and things come up, which is what we're doing with this book as well. What is your response to it? What comes up for you? What's happening on the inside of you? And do you want to say something about that, or do you not? So it's just very interesting to watch what happens inside us, between us, on these spaces. And I've just gotten lost again. I'm waffling now. Save me, Hurls.
So, like I told you before, that I am really wanting to use this in my conversations when I have, wherever I have conversations, basically, because I just talk a lot. And so, whether it's my spaces or anybody else's space, conversations always turn around to all kinds of things. And everything that I have heard, and now that I've understood a little bit better about what you've been writing about and this book is all about, I really feel it relates to a lot of situations where people get all unnecessarily wound up. And like I told you yesterday, that this is something like, well, let me just drop this in the middle. What do you think about this? And to get them to stop thinking about not just me, and this is happening to me. Like, hang on, let's see it. Identifying that particular character, and then say, let's see, what do you think? And I'd love to drop it on people and see how they react to it, or do they even analyze it, synthesize it, cut it apart, shred it, or do they just go like, what the fuck? Like yesterday's, what was that, Mama? So I just want to, I love to see reactions. So I want to use it that way. And then, get into that conversation like we're having. I think more people need to have this kind of conversation. Uh, the more you have it out there, the more it'll spread out, and the more people will like think, literally think. A rarity sometimes, I think. And yes, I'd love to. I'd love to have that.
Sheri.
Yeah, as you were speaking, Fahmi, I was just what came up inside me was a lot of us think that don't understand the difference between being reflexive and reflective, and a lot of us don't understand that being able to reflect can be taught, and this is the way. It is being able to put something up and say, well, what is your response to that? What happens inside you in response to that? Your thoughts, your feelings, and that's how we grow. But it's not the way that conventional teaching is, unless you're, in a master's degree or something like that, and you get there, and then you can have really meaningful investigations into things or research or whatever it might be. But by the time you get there, a little bit like Rumi's poem, you're stuck in all these constructs until you sort of like find your way home. So it is about that capacity to teach people, not in a one directional way where you're throwing stuff at them, You are still throwing stuff at them, but you're not interested in them just taking the information. You're interested in what their response is to that information, and that's where the learning happens, and that's where the sharing happens, because we find that something very different happens inside of me as opposed to you, as opposed to the other person. um, and it is where you get that kaleidoscope sort of effect, and all these different colors come up, and they don't have to be in agreement. They can be very different, and that's where the learning is. So I think that's what you're pointing to, and how that might be useful in sharing that, and then collating the data from the responses as a piece of research or as a learning tool. You can use it in so many different ways, and I think that's part of where it can grow into something other and transcend the actual content. Because I could put up a word, just one word, and we can transcend together out of that into something very different. And that happens in these spaces. You come up with a title, you put it up the top, but where it goes, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 seconds.
No, Sherry, you hit the nail on the head. The only thing is like what you were saying, that this kind of conversation that doesn't take place in a conventional classroom. You're right, but I used to teach high school, and that is the concept that I had in my classroom, because kids, they don't want to speak up. I did actually do this with high school kids. This is the kind of approach I have with them, because you want them to be able to independently converse and give their own opinion without the way they're trained, that, oh my god, I can't say it because somebody else is going to think I'm being dumb or stupid, or my god, my opinions, I better keep it to myself. And that it's okay. So that conversation, that dialogue that takes place, the learning that takes place through that is so, it's amazing, that when you go back and think about it, and you calm down and you regurgitate it, and you realize that there's so much more depth in it. That's something. And I feel like even with adults and in spaces and all that, this is so important for us to, and this is an creative slash artistic behavior. That is what is being promoted, I feel.
Yeah, I just wanted to get the whole room to imagine that. Imagine if every time you spoke, you had to say the right thing, and you had to adhere to a particular narrative and not go outside of that. Imagine that was happening in this room. How torturous and confining would that be? Um, where you don't have the freedom to be yourself. And I think that's what usually happens. Whereas when you have this way of looking at something, it's like anything is okay. Um, so you can bring yourself in a totally different way. And when you do bring yourself in, things get more interesting, and you learn more about yourself. And I think when I was looking at that poem a little earlier that I wanted to keep reading over and over again, like you have, Michael, it is bringing yourself in. And every time you read it, you might look at it very differently depending on where you are in your life. And I think it was Heidegger who said we are shaped by language and language shapes us. It's a reciprocal relationship and a dynamic one. It's not stagnant. And, some people still have that where they feel like they have to say the right thing or adhere to a particular narrative. And sometimes you might jump into a room where, you're anti vax or you're pro vax, and then there's a fight between those two, and we subscribe to one way or another way of thinking. And I think, as we develop and we mature, we are more interested in diversity. And moving forward with technology as well, I think we could very easily get caught up in echo chambers. Um, and the more diversity there is, the better. And this is one way of promoting that.
I have a question. Is my feedback was wondering, like, what was the purpose of that passage in terms of, is the point to educate or just to entertain, or what, like, because I I thought it was funny, but I didn't think it was very true or useful. So I'm kind of wondering what the purpose is.
Well, bloody hell, when you said short, you meant short. What is X? What is X? It means
whatever the hell you want it to mean.
Elaine Benz. X is a pool of narcissus. Well, there you go. Here's a mirror. Have fun.
I was just wondering, if you could read that passage again, and we just go around the room, and I think I'll go last this time and get a response from everybody. So I think the important thing here is when Michael's reading the passage, just notice any thoughts that come up and any feelings that come up, and maybe quickly jot them down, because a lot of our thoughts and feelings are fleeting. Or get your notepad on your phone, because it'd be interesting to just have a look at what sort of response you have, thought or feeling. Is everyone okay with that?
What is X? What is X? It means
whatever the hell you want it to mean.
Elaine Benz. X is a pool of narcissus.
Yeah, I'll go first. There's a little bit of narcissist in everyone. It's hard to admit to ourselves, but yeah, why are we here?
I'll go next.
Mic check. Can people hear me?
Yep.
So when I first came on here, I immediately in my mind's eye envisaged this new sphere that I keep talking about, this amazing realm where there's these entities and they're interacting with one another and contorting, and those effects would affect others, and then that flow goes on with ripples within ripples and things like that. And then I was amazed at the rapid pace at which it moved, and within that I saw a potential, and I decided to journey throughout it and see if I could bring my ideas into fruition while still living and maintaining a life in the real realm that we all live in. So I decided to explore this realm that I decided to say to make sure that it was a safe place for me to travel. And I decided that I would shield myself against any negative or what I felt to be negative. And I also made a decision to be unapologetically myself, even at times though I would catch myself apologizing. And I guess that was partially narcissistic of me, but during that journey, we end up in places like this. So yeah, I'm grateful, I guess, for that little part of me that I allowed to be the narcissist in a way, if that makes sense.
How dare you have needs, Hal?
I have a question. Is my feedback was wondering, like, what was the purpose of that passage in terms of is the point to educate or just to entertain, or what? Like, because I thought it was funny, but I didn't think it was very true or useful. So I'm kind of wondering what the purpose is.
I feel it was to tickle your brain.
To discover the level of your attention span within the space you're attending.
To question the passage, I guess, and I think you're questioning it in a meaningful way. You're saying, well, how is this meaningful for me? How do I apply this? And what's to be gained from the passage? And I think that's a valid response, Mentis.
Sure, I'll save you, Sheri. First of all, to clarify, I didn't have a negative reaction. I was just I joined the room when that was being read, and I had no context. I don't know what the intent of the book is. So I asked a question that no one answered, and then everyone started talking about my response, which is fascinating. And I'm happy for all of you, but I'd still like to know what the intent is. if that's something you can answer for me, Mike.
That's perfect. I'm just out hanging out with my little one at the moment. So, Yui, if you'd like to take that away. And Mantis, we have spoken about this before, so it might jog your memory when Waddy helps with that.
I just want to quickly say before Michael jumps in, I just used the word negative just to make an example of it. I didn't think you were being negative. I just wanted to frame it as that so that it's just
Yeah,
in
no.
a different.
I mean, nor me.
So the chapter that kicks off the book is called "What I Learned on X
Oh,
Applied."
sorry. Can you explain to Mantis the I guess the beginning of the story, because I'm not sure. I think that's what he's asking.
Oh man, that's a long story.
No, just like
Yeah, we're gonna have
is
to
the goal-
summarize
let me ask pointed questions. Is there an intent to inform people with this book? Yes or no?
Yes.
Is there an intent to educate people with this book?
Yes.
I'm assuming there's an intent to entertain as well.
Yes.
But I think
To
what's happening, I just want to quickly jump in. I think the book is evolving, Mentis. My understanding is that Michael has put together a book because it was a challenge that he had just happened. Let's just say that. And then he's written some chapters. And I think the book is evolving into, all right, so he's written some words and then we're looking at people's responses. What are your responses to that particular chapter and what sort of dialogue happens from that? That's, I think, where we're at with it.
which isn't really helpful as well, because an individual reading the book versus dialogue around it are very, very different interactions with the information.
Which is what we were saying before you jumped in. So you might, when you get some time, have a look at the conversation we had before you made your magical appearance.
Thank God this is recorded. Yeah.
Yeah, there's every opportunity to go back and listen to us waffling.
As long as Dan had some waffles, hopefully with some fried chicken.
You see, Fami has her hand up.
I just wanted to, from what I understand, I wanted to say to Mentis, hi Mentis. I was, to me, it's like Canterbury Tales. So it's a reflection of what the contemporary Canterbury Tales in a raw, rough format at the moment. Except the only thing is, in the contemporary fashion, he's got the involvement of the community, and he is not only showing a reflection of what the community is and who you are, he's taking a very daring stand in saying, let me show who you are. Let me show what's around you. Do you know who you are? Do you see yourself? Are you on the right path? You might be on the right path. You might be on the wrong path. We don't know that. And that's a question. And I think this story, actually, this book, helps you come up with questions, to question yourself, to look inside yourself, to look at your surroundings, and to question what's happening out there and whether you're comfortable in that surrounding or not. And you might be or you might not be. If you're not, what are you going to do about it? If you are, what else can you do about it? So I find it, and there's a lot of dry humor in there, and there's a lot of sarcasm in there. And it is to make people think. It is to make people think without telling them, listen, I want you to think about this. This is when you just drop it and then you watch the ripple effect.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Then I have two suggestions. One is, or one suggestion to consider, like the way it's presented sort of holds up a view or a lens of X, and then as I think we've discussed it, it gives people that opportunity to sort of reflect, to see if that's them, and whatever questions or challenges that might pose or raise. The one thing I'd consider is providing the alternative. Like it may look this way, and out there are these other people that are there to get value, to give back, to grow a community. And is that you? Like, which one are you? And maybe just shape their own thoughts around it a bit. I can see benefits to both. I would just consider that as an alternative. Yeah, it's 99.99999% like that. But guess what? There is some, there is that needle in the haystack, and if you search for floozy speak, you'll find it.
Is no one speaking, or can I not hear someone?
No, I was just waiting for something that if I could.
Oh, Sheri, you're driving here. Don't look in the back seat to see who's got the wheel.
I was just going to say, as you were speaking, what I God, my brain's not functioning, but I think what I see happening is something a little bit different, and hopefully Michael can steer this into a direction where it's not the norm, because I can see him doing something very different with this if he goes in a particular direction, but I don't know what that is yet.
Kind of like
I
a
almost
Rorschach.
not sure, but it almost feels like he's onto something, but he's in the middle of it and it's emerging. And I think this is like the skeleton stage of what's happening. And that's the feeling I get with his project. And with what Fahmi was saying a little earlier, I think it's really important at this stage to not give it any boundaries, I guess, in relation to meaning, and that keeps it open to everyone giving it their own meaning of what it means or doesn't, um, rather than having sort of like a final destination. So maybe it could be an open source book sort of thing that continues to evolve. I don't claim to know what it could turn into, but it could be along the themes of people are like kaleidoscopes and we're not constant. And one day I might say something and the next day I might contradict myself. And is that okay? Can I have multiple ideas that coexist? Can we have multiple narratives that still make sense together, or opposing views that still make sense? So I think that's the sort of direction that I see it going in. But how you gather all that together and put it across in a meaningful way, is it one thing, or is it like an octopus with 10,000 tentacles or 10 billion tentacles? Is that what it turns into? So that's the sort of vision I have in my mind. And I'm more of a visionary rather than someone sitting down and doing the shit. Tell me to do something, it's never gonna happen. Ask me about ideas, I'm great. So I'm retarded in that way. Sorry, I shouldn't be using that word, but I'm owning that word for me, not about anyone else. I have my disabilities.
Sheri, I apologize for chiming in there. I wasn't trying to talk over you. The word I threw out there was Rorschach, and it sounded like as you continued to talk, it very much was kind of that concept where it's just there, but people are really given the space to interpret their own meaning from it.
Yeah, I think that is a good word, and I think people do that regardless, and we just whether you identify it or not. So when I say something, you're going to interpret what I'm saying very differently to Ren or Dan, or because we have our past, we have our future, we have our lived experience, and we have different brains. And I think, when I go back in history, I thought everyone thought like me, and I thought that everyone felt like me, and I thought that everyone saw the world like me, and they had the same brain. And I was rudely awakened into finding out as you traverse through life that that is not a fact. It's almost delusional thinking. And I think when we look at the system, it's almost like we're entrapped in this socially sanctioned insanity where we have to subscribe to one religion or one way of being or one way of thinking. And I think through this age of technology, it's giving us that opportunity to have so many different vantage points or lenses on the same thing. And I think that's the direction potentially that this could go in. Yeah, so exactly, Mentis. Long way to say exactly. I think Fahmi should just
Sure.
jump in.
Well, no, I think for me, I feel like it's important to remember that even though whoever has written this, right, is not to keep that in mind. It's like those great philosophers, whether it's Socrates or whatever, people who are thorough, they're observing and they're writing down what they felt, and it's just there. It's just there. It's what's the word? Dialectic. That's the concept, I think. And so it is to promote the thinking in everybody else. And so it's not to do with, I think it's very important that we keep in mind that who's written it, why has he written it, what was his whole intention. I think that needs to be taken out of the equation because it has just been dropped. And so what do you do when it's been dropped? It's like when you're walking and you drop the parcel, how many people are going to bend down and help pick up those parcels for you? That kind of attitude is just there. I think that's important to remember, not why he wrote it or who wrote it for what reasons. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's what I mean. It's like one person can look at that and go, well, why is this here? And question that. And that's a response. And you can say, well, it's not to be questions. We can just look at it and respond to it. So it's interesting that people have different responses to the same phenomena, going back to phenomenology. And as you were speaking, Fahmi, I was thinking of Rumi and Shems. And, I love Rumi's poetry, and I also love Hafiz. And I know that, you know, Rumi and Shams had a dialogue that was so deep, and they had these conversations that would go on forever. And I remember reading that he had neglected his family and neglected everyone, and people became so jealous of their relationship and their capacity to have these deep and meaningful conversations, which beautiful poetry has come from, and beautiful ways of looking at the world and the universe have come from, just these two people having dialogue. And I think when we look back at history, I think Shems was killed for it because people became so jealous of this deep connection. And I think that people want that deep connection, and hence why we're here. And if that's to be conceptualized as narcissism, so be it. Because if you look at narcissism, it is about feeling empty and wanting to fill that void. And if we're falling into the void, maybe this is just one way to give people something that they need. Because I think the analysts said initially, why are clients frustrated with us? Like, what is it that they need that we haven't been able to provide? And I think that's the question for all of us. What is it that we need, and what do we need to create in the world to be able to fill that void or need? And that's what we're doing.
What is X? It means
Whatever the hell you want it to mean.
X is a pool of narcissus.
I'll say first off, I actually really like the book. It reminds me very strongly of Robert Greene's Laws of Nature, a book I read a long time ago. Um, Other than like the tone, also really strikes me of Robert Greene a lot. That kind of you're talking to someone and then there's like a story, or there's a kind of call back to a philosopher who has like a specific field of knowledge, and then they apply it to great effect, and then hey, here's how we could apply it in that situation. So that tone, that delivery, the kind of storytelling definitely reminds me very strongly of Robert. Good thing, because Robert Greene is a really good writer. And I think if you haven't read Laws of Nature by Robert Greene, I think that's a good book to pick up. It's very analogous to this, of him, telling these stories and how they apply to nature. Uh, you know, Also, if you're in the hood, you got to read some Robert Greene. That's like a top tier Harlem excellence. If you're in the hood, can always talk about the. I've learned that. But I would say that's pretty good. In terms of the first chapter, I liked it a lot. I think that it's a very interesting term. It's hard to really talk about. There's so there. It just feels like there's so much. What I feel like it's like a Buddhist koan where like the guy one of those kind of like teachings where it's meant to confuse or it's meant to not have a good answer, and really what the unanswerability of the question actually provides you to try to create your own interpretations, which help you actually solve your own problem. So if you're coming to look for answers, instead what those questions do is help you generate the answers for yourself. And I think works for narcissism because it's just really hard to kind of define in the ways people use it. There's technical definitions. There's the kind of heartfelt definition that we think of it, and then there's everybody else's definition. So I didn't know what Mike meant by narcissism, but I kind of resonated it with this kind of self-assession that is not only positive. Sometimes it's looking at your own shit and saying it's cool, but also looking at your own shit and hating your own shit. There's a lot of artists in the space, and we talk about our shit a lot, right? Do you like my shit? I don't really like my shit today. That kind of talk definitely gets around. So I think it's about that, and it is kind of like you want to come in, meet other people, talk about your shit, and maybe figure shit out. I like shooting the shit with a lot of people too. So I think it's a cool first term. Maybe to resonate with Mentis, maybe there needs to be a little bit more direction. So because there's some people you ask those questions that try to help them generate their own question, and their brain goes nope. And that's where you kind of maybe need to guide those people. But I like the first chapter a lot, and I kind of like that style of the book. It's very easy to read, very accessible. I actually think like as a strategy, you could put it in some LLM or something, and then have like an ad at the end if you want to know. Here's what they want to know. Buy the book. That would be a cool way to sell it. But yeah, that's it.
If you think the first chapter is interesting, you should read the first 5 pages.
What is X? It means
Whatever the hell you want it to mean.
X is a pool of narcissists.
What is X? It's a pool of narcissists. We spend most of our time on X looking at our own shit. Yes, that's what it is. But that's not to say that we cannot harness what are traditionally called vices and rebaptize our worst qualities as our best, Nietzsche. Transform the risk that is on our plate. So I like Sheri's approach to it. I think it's really intellectually honest. Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, you said that we're a pool of narcissists that like looking at our own shit. And I think what came to me was like, sometimes it's cool shit, like.
Yo, I love your stuff. You should look at your stuff. Yo, sometimes you have to. Dude, have you ever given yourself a round of applause in the mirror? I've given myself a round of applause in the mirror. Sheri, go ahead.
Do
you realize the level of mental illness you're interacting with on these spaces, and that you don't know who you're talking to on the other end? How many of these people are fucking like just borderline retarded? Like they couldn't survive out here in the real world. They need like government assistance. They're all, you know what I mean? They can't even hold down a job. You don't know what you're talking to on the internet. So like to entangle with that shit is like retardation. I don't know. To me, it's like a failed experiment. It's a cool idea.
Is that the Webster?
I've been in spaces. I talk shit. I've tangled with all kinds of mental illness on this platform. But the levels of mental illness are like, this is a high degree. I would say 60%. people have real psychological issues down here.
Yeah, it sounds like your
on this
poor life
platform.
choices and the people you're connecting with. I believe. I don't know. Anytime I hear someone say mental
I'm gonna
I'll
go
masturbation,
tell you
with the
about poor life
60%.
choices.
yeah.
Coming in this fucking
Anytime
space
I
was
hear
a
someone
poor
say
life
mental
choice.
masturbation, it's usually my
100%.
time to leave. But I decided to come up and say hi.
I'm telling you right now, a poor life example of a poor life choice was coming this morning and coming into here.
Well, pretty
You
soon you'll
coming
be
in
off
here?
the
Fucking
grid, so
wasting
you
my
won't
time.
have
I
a
need to leave.
phone to be.
No, I'm gonna leave, but you're a bitch.
Yeah, but you'll be off the
Yeah,
grid soon, so you
And
won't
you're
have a
always
phone.
be a
Because
Well,
fucking
I think
man,
bitch.
off the
I'm
grid
out.
means that
dude, this is
you're not connected
exercise
to
for you,
technology.
motherfucker.
More
You
Thanks
often
for
than
needed
not,
this.
dropping
I'm
in,
coming
This is
around.
your
Yeah, I'd
Diesel.
cold
rather go
shower,
fucking
asshole.
bang
You wanted a
rocks
cold
with a
shower.
sledgehammer. Be more
Yeah,
productive than this
No,
shit.
I'm feeling
does
you.
that
I
work?
bang rocks for a living.
What's the
It's
Fucking
color of the
mental
good.
boathouse?
masturbation for fucking retards.
What's the color of the boathouse in Hereford?
And also, are you saying 100% of people are 60% retarded, or 60% of the people are retarded?
Oh man, did you guys kick him? That sucks. That was awesome.
No,
No,
That was
no,
no, we didn't kick him.
I invited him to co-host, but he declined.
So have you heard about this book that he's written?
He wrote a book.
He wrote a book.
All right, I need a link to that then. He's
Which is
not
okay.
doing. He's not doing shit. He's not doing shit.
Oh, you think that? You might think that.
Yeah, I'm mulling it over. Give me one moment.
So talk us through it. What are you thinking about there?
That Mike wrote a book, so I'm just like,
Okay.
I'm very confused. I'm like, so
Okay.
what? No, like, let me just finish my thought. This is the
Yeah.
thought process now, like of the book itself. Is this even a real thing? That's what I'm trying to decipher this in my mind right now.
So, like I told you before, that I am really wanting to use this in my conversations when I have, wherever I have conversations, basically, because I just talk a lot. And so, whether it's my spaces or anybody else's space, conversations always turn around to all kinds of things. And everything that I have heard, and now that I've understood a little bit better about what you've been writing about, and this book is all about, I really feel it relates to a lot of situations where people get all unnecessarily wound up. And like I told you yesterday, that this is something like, well, let me just drop this in the middle. What do you think about this? And to get them to stop thinking about not just me, and this is happening to me. Like, hang on, let's see it. Identifying that particular character, and then say, let's see, what do you think? And I'd love to drop it on people and see how they react to it, or do they even analyze it, synthesize it, cut it apart, shred it, or do they just go like, what the fuck? Like yesterday's, what was that, Mama? So I just want to, I love to see reactions. So I want to use it that way. And then, get into that conversation like we're having. I think more people need to have this kind of conversation. Uh, the more you have it out there, the more it'll spread out, and the more people will like think. Literally, think. A rarity sometimes, I think. And yes, I'd love to. I'd love to have that.
Sheri.
Yeah, as you were speaking, Fahmi, I was just what came up inside me was a lot of us think that don't understand the difference between being reflexive and reflective, and a lot of us don't understand that being able to reflect can be taught, and this is the way. It is being able to put something up and say, well, what is your response to that? What happens inside you in response to that? Your thoughts, your feelings, and that's how we grow. But it's not the way that conventional teaching is, unless you're, in a master's degree or something like that, and you get there, and then you can have really meaningful investigations into things or research or whatever it might be. But by the time you get there, a little bit like Rumi's poem, you're stuck in all these constructs until you sort of like find your way home. So it is about that capacity to teach people, not in a one directional way where you're throwing stuff at them, You are still throwing stuff at them, but you're not interested in them just taking the information. You're interested in what their response is to that information, and that's where the learning happens, and that's where the sharing happens, because we find that something very different happens inside of me as opposed to you, as opposed to the other person. Um, and it is where you get that kaleidoscope sort of effect, and all these different colors come up, and they don't have to be in agreement. They can be very different, and that's where the learning is. So I think that's what you're pointing to, and how that might be useful in sharing that, and then collating the data from the responses as a piece of research or as a learning tool. You can use it in so many different ways, and I think that's part of where it can grow into something other and transcend the actual content. Because I could put up a word, just one word, and we can transcend together out of that into something very different. And that happens in these spaces. You come up with a title, you put it up the top, but where it goes, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 seconds.
No, Sheri, you hit the nail on the head. The only thing is like what you were saying, that this kind of conversation that doesn't take place in a conventional classroom. You're right, but I used to teach high school, and that is the concept that I had in my classroom, because kids, they don't want to speak up. I did actually do this with high school kids. This is the kind of approach I have with them, because you want them to be able to independently converse and give their own opinion without the way they're trained, that, oh my god, I can't say it because somebody else is going to think I'm being dumb or stupid, or my god, my opinions, I better keep it to myself. And that is okay. So that conversation, that dialogue that takes place, the learning that takes place through that is it's amazing, that when you go back and think about it, and you calm down and you regurgitate it, and you realize that there's so much more depth in it. That's something. And I feel like even with adults and in spaces and all that, this is so important for us to, and this is an creative slash artistic behavior. That is what is being promoted, I feel.
Yeah, I just wanted to get the whole room to imagine if every time you spoke, you had to say the right thing, and you had to adhere to a particular narrative and not go outside of that. Imagine that was happening in this room. How torturous and confining would that be? Um, where you don't have the freedom to be yourself. And I think that's what usually happens. Whereas when you have this way of looking at something, it's like anything is okay. Um, so you can bring yourself in a totally different way. And when you do bring yourself in, things get more interesting, and you learn more about yourself. And I think when I was looking at that poem a little earlier that I wanted to keep reading over and over again, like you have, Michael, it is bringing yourself in. And every time you read it, you might look at it very differently depending on where you are in your life. And I think it was Heidegger who said we are shaped by language, and language shapes us. It's a reciprocal relationship and a dynamic one. It's not stagnant. And some people still have that, where they feel like they have to say the right thing or adhere to a particular narrative. And sometimes you might jump into a room where you're anti-vax or you're pro-vax, and then there's a fight between those two, and we subscribe to one way or another way of thinking. And I think, as we develop and we mature, we are more interested in diversity. And moving forward with technology as well, I think we could very easily get caught up in echo chambers. And the more diversity there is, the better. And this is one way of promoting that.
I often interrupt too much, and the book taught me to be aware of how much I interrupt. And so if I don't say anything, it's because I'm trying to practice not interrupting.
So, Michael, tell me why you wanted to share that one.
we used to identify with the way that we sequenced words, but I think we have enough information and technology to know that if there is a divinity to us, it's not in how we use our mouth words. It's in something more than that.